In this episode, we'll be looking at a short period of human evolution from a behavioural perspective. We'll be considering modern humans, that's people like you and me, and how we've changed over the last 200 to 300,000 years. To be a modern human is to be a member of the last remaining species of the genus Homo sapiens, the result of around 6 million years of evolution from the first bipedal, small canine species of hominids. In The Origin of Species, Charles Darwin described evolution as descent with modification, and we are modern humans as a consequence of evolution. As a species, humans are very vulnerable individuals, but we are collectively very strong. That collective strength is a consequence of evolving in two different ways, one biological and the other sociocultural. Biological evolution is the descent with modification of innate physical, emotional, psychological and behavioural characteristics. As individuals, we all share common characteristics. For example, on our heads we all have hair, 2 eyes facing the front, 2 ears on the sides, 1 nose in the middle and 1 mouth towards the bottom. But as individuals, we have different varieties of those human characteristics. Blue or brown eyes, sharp or flat noses, narrow or thick lips, straight or curly hair. Those different varieties are traits. Sociocultural evolution is the descent with modification of learned ideological, material and behavioural characteristics. All cultures and societies share common characteristics. For example, all cultures have a language and a staple diet. All societies have organisation and systems. Individual cultures and societies have varieties of those social characteristics. They speak Greek or Mandarin, eat potatoes or pasta, have capitalism or socialism, a monarchy or a republic. Those varieties are norms. Coevolution in this context is the parallel interaction of biological evolution and sociocultural evolution. Darwin recognised the link between biological and sociocultural evolution without being able to explain it. In The Descent of Man, he said, "The formation of different languages and of distinct species, and the proofs that both have been developed through a gradual process, are curiously parallel." When the traits of living organisms evolve, the result is a new species. When the norms of humanity evolve, the result is new culture or society. In modern humans, the coevolution of traits and norms results in new ethnicity, a population with distinctive physical and social attributes. Biological and sociocultural evolution are both descent with modification, a process with 4 parts. The 4 parts of the process are variation, the source of modifications, diffusion, the spread of modification, retention, the selection of modification, and descent, the inheritance of modifications. All 4 of these mechanisms operate concurrently, and the result is evolution. The mechanisms apply to both biological and sociocultural evolution. Biological variation is initiated by the modification and mixing of DNA as genes. Sociocultural variation is initiated by the modification and mixing of thoughts, ideas and notions as mental concepts. Variation also occurs in populations as a result of migration. When an individual from one population joins another population, genes and concepts from the source population become variations in the receiving population. Genes diffuse through a population as individuals reproduce. concepts diffuse through a population as individuals communicate. Variations are retained in a population either by selection or drift. Natural selection of traits is a process of elimination through competition within an environment. Those traits which increase the probability of survival and reproduction in individuals are retained. Any which reduce the probability are lost. Artificial selection is also a process of elimination, but this time the agent of selection is humanity, not nature. Those norms which have the most utility and increase social effectiveness are retained. Those which reduce effectiveness are discarded. If traits or norms are neutral, they have no advantage or disadvantage, retention is a consequence of drift or chance. If the only individual in a small population with a particular trait dies by chance without reproducing, the trait is lost with them, leaving only the alternative traits. In a large population with the same level of a minority trait, the chance loss of one individual would not remove the trait, and both varieties are retained. Similarly, if a minority group with their own norms separates from a population, then those norms will be lost from the population, leaving only the norms of the majority. At the same time, a new population is formed with the norms of the minority group. These minority groups are known as splinter groups, factions, or sects. Descent is the act of inheritance. Traits are inherited by reproduction, passing on retained traits from one generation to the next. Norms are inherited by socialization, learning from the previous generation as part of individual development. All human characteristics change as a result of coevolution. We'll look at one distinctly human characteristic which helps to make us collectively strong. We'll look at communication. Communication is the transmission of information from one person to another. It would be helpful if we could do that directly, but we can't. Instead, we use symbols to communicate as best we can. Those symbols are the basis of systems of language. When we communicate, the sender uses symbols to represent their thoughts and feelings. The receiver interprets the symbols they receive to understand what the sender means. The problem with this approach is that what is received is often not the same as what was sent and meant. Sight and sound have been used to transmit information from one person to another since long before the existence of modern humans, and we still communicate that way. Visual communication symbols include facial expressions and gestures, the basic components of body language. The simplest audible systems which convey meaning are single sounds. For example, "I'll," meaning I'm in pain, "Oi," meaning pay attention, or "A," which means what does that mean? Gestures, expressions and sounds can be combined in a single behaviour. For example, shh. By 70,000 years ago, sounds had evolved into words, symbols which represent concepts. For example, breakfast, chef, cook and pancake. By 50,000 years ago, words had evolved into sentences, strings of words which add meaning by joining concepts together. For example, the chef is cooking pancakes for breakfast. The earliest evidence of pictures being used to communicate is around 40,000 years ago. Pictures can convey a lot of information very efficiently, and combining pictures with words in diagrams is a very effective way to communicate. Around 5,000 years ago, pictures emerged which represent sounds, an alphabet, and the pictures were combined to make words. This was the beginning of written language, the visual representation of audible language. Meanwhile, gestures and expressions continued to evolve, and the first formal sign languages emerged about 1500 years ago. Today, we can add artificial languages to the range of natural languages, languages designed by humans to enable machines invented by humans to communicate. Morse code for the telegraph, machine code for the computer, and TCP/IP for the Internet. All modifications in communication are the result of co-evolution. We'll look at one particular example, that of spoken language. All the parts of the body shown here are necessary to make the variety of sounds used by the sender. The ears are used by the receiver to sense the sounds emitted by the sender. The brain is used by the sender to control transmission and by the receiver to interpret what they hear. Having all these physical parts is characteristic of all humans. The anatomy of each part and the behaviour of each part in modern humans are evolved characteristics, and every one is fundamental to audible language. When a baby is born, the way it communicates using sound is to cry. Crying is an innate human behaviour, which makes use of all these biological characteristics. The actions necessary to make every other sound are learned through development and socialization. Over a period of about 10 years, a child learns the actions necessary to make the different sounds, and each set of actions is stored in memory as a skill. They also learn to associate words with concepts. They learn the rules for connecting words together in sentences. They learn the nuances of stress and tones, and they learn comprehension, how to extract meaning from what they hear. All of this knowledge is stored in memory too. In the English language there are 44 different sounds, and the average vocabulary at age 12 is around 12,000 words. Add to that the complications of syntax, stress and tones, and learning this set of norms is no mean feat. It requires a brain of considerable size and complexity. Learning the norms enables a person to communicate with someone else who has learned the same norms, but not with anyone who has learned a different set of norms in a different culture, even though they are biologically the same. Language is a consequence of the biological evolution of the species and the social evolution of culture. Spoken language is the result of co-evolution in humans. We can now update the very first diagram we used in the episode on individual behaviour, a diagram which categorises types of behaviour. We can add the two categories of evolution. We can add traits acquired through reproduction to automatic innate behaviours as biological evolution, and the norms acquired through socialization to automatic learned behaviours as sociocultural evolution. If you look at any behaviour which is characteristic of modern humans, you will find evidence of biological evolution and sociocultural evolution working together as co-evolution. Whilst modern humans have not evolved very much biologically over the last 200,000 years, the same cannot be said of human society. In the same way that we categorise organisms as species with distinct biological characteristics, we can categorise social networks as societies with distinct sociocultural characteristics. We can distinguish societies by their characteristics, and we can connect them by their ancestry. In the next episode, we will look at human societies which have existed in the last 200,000 to 300,000 years and explore their characteristics and norms. We will begin with hunter-gatherer society.